Good morning and welcome to the Return Homestead. Today we're going to be clearing some ground. Mostly we're going to be working with the chainsaw to bring down some of the bigger trees in front of the guest house we've been remodeling. We want to get those things on the ground so they can start seasoning. We're going to need firewood this winter. So come on, let's go have a look at the project. This is the area we want to start working on clearing today. I don't know how many of these trees we'll get down. Probably only 2 or 3 of them. We're not necessarily trying to clear the whole thing off today. Just want to start getting some of this cleared up. These trees will make good firewood for us. There is a maple in here that we do want to try to save. But for the most part, everything on the hillside in front of the guest house is just trouble. These are extremely tall trees and they are much too close to the house. So we want to get these on the ground before the wind puts them on the ground. Got some wild elderberry that is blooming in here. The birds ate all of the berries off of it last year. This is the maple that we want to try to save. It's sitting right next to a rock face. I'm not sure if it's got enough root to be safe where it's at, so we'll probably end up taking it down. That's one of the bigger trees that's in here. All of these small tulip poplars have got to go now. They will grow quickly, and we don't want those hanging over the house. But this is the first target for today, is this birch tree right on the corner. It's right on the edge of the low road. Everything's pretty well overgrown, but I do have a nice clear landing pad for this birch. So we're going to put that on the ground first and then just start working our way back through the trees and up the hill. First order of business, though, is to clear some of this underbrush. I never like to cut trees in an area where I don't have a clear escape path in all directions. Whenever I cut, I want to make sure I can run quickly 15 feet in at least one direction. But if I can get multiple directions, that's going to make me a lot happier and a lot safer. So let's get busy with this underbrush. I've got a weed eater and a hedge clipper to kind of help get some of this brush cleared out of the way. So I'm going to get those out of the truck and get busy cutting some plants. That clears all the lower access to the tree. I need to get these lower limbs off so I can get a good look at the trunk, figure out where to stand in order to cut. The tree is sitting on a nearly vertical section with a rock face just behind it. That's going to provide for a nice safe spot for me if I can cause this to fall over onto the road. Now there is a little bit of a lean in the tree, pushing it back the other direction. So I want to try to make my back cut up above where it's leaning. I may have to push this one over with some wedges because I want to make sure it falls right where I cleared off on the other side of the road there. So I'm going to grab the chainsaw and get busy cutting these lower limbs. So the first thing I want to do is get a good edge on all the teeth on the chain. It's easy to rush out and grab your saw and just go start cutting. But if these teeth are dull, you're going to end up fighting the saw. It's heavy enough already. The last thing you want to do is to wrestle with it to get it to go through the wood. And the easiest solution is just to get an edge on each one of the teeth. Now, I've watched many videos on how to do this, and I agree with everyone that says you should take this into your shop, throw it up inside of a clamp where you got a nice firm foundation, get a magnifying lens on each one of the teeth, and very carefully and meticulously hone each edge to perfect sharpness. But the reality is you're going to need to sharpen your chain on a regular basis. As you're working through some of the denser woods like oak, you're going to dull these teeth very quickly. It'll lose its effectiveness, and you'll find yourself fighting the saw to get it to go through the wood. You'll see that instead of producing nice chips that are flying off of the bar, you're going to get sawdust falling on the ground. And the more powdery it gets, that's a good indication that the teeth are getting dull, and it's just going to make your life a lot harder if you work with dull teeth. That means you're going to have to stop and sharpen this regularly out in the field. Anytime you hit the ground while the saw is running, that dirt is going to immediately take the edge off of the teeth. So I decided when I started working with a chainsaw, I needed to teach myself how to put an edge that would be sufficient on each one of the teeth to allow me to keep working without having to come in from the woods. And so when I started doing this, I just sat down on the ground, got my sharpener, and started trying to figure out how I could hang on to the saw while I worked to put the edge on it. I do use a sharpener that's going to do two things for me. It's going to put an edge on the tooth so I'll be able to hone each one of the teeth, but it's also going to take down the raker that's right in front of the tooth. Now that's your depth gauge. It actually sets how deep the tooth is going to be able to cut. And as you sharpen these teeth, you are going to wear them down slowly. And if you don't set that raker, if you don't take that depth gauge down just a little bit, you'll get to a point where your teeth aren't cutting at all. So I like to use a sharpener that allows me to do both in one motion. And the first thing I want to do is find a starting point. And on every chain, you're going to have one tooth that's green. And that's where the chain was joined together to make a complete circle. And that's a great place to start. You'll usually end up with two teeth in a row that either are facing in the same direction, which shouldn't happen, or you'll have an extra large gap in between the teeth here. And so this is a good place to watch for as you're doing your sharpening. And I do leave the lock undone. So all I need to do is set my sharpener on the tooth and try to make smooth, even motions in one direction to the cutting edge of the tooth. And it's a good idea to get the same number of strokes on each tooth. You'll know if you sharpen your chain unevenly because you'll start cutting weird curve shapes through the wood. That's because one side of the chain is biting in harder than the other. So I usually like to get just 6 quick strokes on each one of the teeth. As you can see, there's a lot of teeth. This is going to take a few minutes to get this done, but this will make all the difference in the amount of time it takes to cut through a log. So bear with me while I get this thing sharpened. Before you start running your power tools, make sure you take a moment to think about safety. I always like to wear ear protection. These things make a lot of noise and they will damage your hearing. At the very least, they're going to push down those little hairs inside of your ear. It's going to make it really hard to hear for the rest of the day. You want something to cover your eyes. You're going to be throwing wood chips all over the place. Even with the weed eater, you're going to be throwing chunks of plant up at your own head. Make sure you got your eyes covered. And to work with the chainsaw, you definitely want a decent pair of chaps. Now the chaps are designed so that if you get a kickback from your saw and the chain hits you in the leg, it grabs a hold of the chaps that fly apart and stop the chain from moving, which turns the saw off for you. Now you may still take some damage on your shin or your thigh, but that's a whole lot better than cutting your entire leg off. We just need to gas up the tools and we're ready to go. What? I can't hear you. I have ear protection on. So you can see from this angle that this tree is actually leaning back. In fact, it's leaning back in the direction of the house. That's one of the reasons why these have to come off. They're on a relatively steep slope, and as the slope slowly creeps down, that causes the tree to start to fall back towards the slope. So this one's going to be a little bit tricky to get on the ground where I want it. Most of the heavy branches are on this side of the tree, which is good. That means it's going to tend to pull in the direction I want it to go. But this lean is kind of problematic. I think I'm going to try working higher up on the tree. So I'm going to put my notch in right about here, start my back cut, and if the tree tries to set down on my saw, I'm going to pull my saw out. We'll get some wedges in there to hold the kerf open, set the hinge completely, and then I'll use some steel wedges to push the tree in the direction that I want it to go. Worst case scenario, if it goes the wrong way, it's only going to fall into some other trees, which is going to hang it up, going to make it a little harder to get on the ground, but it's not going to be able to get to the house. So we're going to go ahead and try this up top, see if I can push it over in the direction I need it to go. It doesn't show up well on this camera angle, but this tree is directly below about a 3-foot vertical drop. So I'm having a difficult time finding my footing, making sure I'm not going to go sliding down the hill while I'm cutting. Well, there's a good reason why you want to clear the ground around the area where you're going to be cutting. If you have a look down here, as I'm clearing off brush, taking these branches down, I discover a piece of cable buried in the ground. Now, if I had not cleared this off and not found this cable and then needed to exit in this direction, that certainly could have been a disaster. So that's a good reason for clearing off the area around where you're cutting the tree. We got the tree down almost where I wanted it, about 6 feet to the left. I'm going to attribute that to working on this hillside. So as I'm making these cuts, I'm also trying not to fall off this cliff. But you can see this is nearly textbook. The notch cut, you can see the back cut came straight through, left about an inch of hinge there, and that's what allowed the tree to simply lay over right where we wanted it and snap off. Thank you, Lord. Well, we got the tree on the ground. That's only step one. Now I got to get all the branches off of it, get it cut up into logs that are appropriate size for our fireplace. But you can see already, I was working up in shadow. We take the tree down and now we've got sunlight on the ground here. So as we take the rest of these trees down, we're going to open the ground up to sunlight. That's going to allow us to get undergrowth to grow here. Hopefully we can put the goats to work to keep that eaten down. The plan would be to get grass on this entire slope, and then eventually we'll use this area right in front of the house as kind of a garden strip. We may put an orchard in, we may put in blueberries, blackberries. There's a lot of opportunity here. We just got to get the trees off of it and get the sunlight in. So I'm going to get busy taking the limbs off of this tree and start bucking out the main portion of the log so it can be ready for firewood. Well, that's the main part of the cleanup. There's a couple of large logs that you saw go rolling down the hill. We'll have to drag those up. I'll buck them up top where we're going to be stacking the lumber. We've still got quite a few logs that are down the hill. It's going to take a while to clear all of these branches, and we've let sunlight in here, so it's now getting hot down here underneath what used to be the tree. We're going to take a quick break, get some water, and get back to cleaning up this mess. This is our low road. It is our best mechanized access out to the lake. We don't want to leave it blocked. So I've still got a lot of clearing to do before the end of the day. This hemlock is substantially bigger than the little beech we just took down. Want to try to put it right in the same spot. It was too dangerous for Marty to stay down there watching what I was doing. The back cut was a little awkward, so I actually used a plunge cut, using the point of the saw to go in just 2 inches behind where I wanted the hinge and working backwards to get back out of the wood. That's a lot of work. It's a big tree. As you're doing this kind of work, pay attention to your weather. It's over 80 degrees out here today. We've been out now working in the sun since we took all the shade away. I'm going to take a break. There's nothing wrong with stopping and taking 15 or 20 minutes to recuperate. This kind of work out in this heat, it can take a toll on you. If you don't want to be in bed all day tomorrow after cutting this whole thing up, be sure to take a moment to rest in between cuttings. I'm going to do that and cool off real quick. Well, sometimes you just reach the end of the road. On a hot day like this, doing this kind of work, you're going to wear out faster than you expect to. I thought I could get the rest of this trunk bucked out, but there's no way. I'm not going to finish this tonight. I've already gotten my saw stuck twice. This second time, it's pinched in there pretty good. I'm going to have to wedge these rounds off of there to get my saw loose, and by the time I get through doing that, I'm not going to have anything left in the tank. I do appreciate you joining me here today, watching me take these trees down. Please do subscribe to the channel. We've got a lot more trees to go. You don't want to miss out on those. Hit the like button while you're in there. We'll see you next time.